But next up, very, very excited. We're doing fantastic websites and how to deploy them with Ohad. And before we bring Ohad out, I have a little fun fact about Ohad here. He's the founder and CEO of StackBit and has been building products and companies for 25 years now and recently took up construction as a hobby. Welcome, Ohad.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. And yes,
Yeah,
it's true. It's all true.
all of it's true. And how did you get started with construction? Was it during this pandemic that you got started with that?
It was a little bit before that. We got into a small project for my family, and we were on a budget, and it kind of coerced us to be very creative and get into the trade, and well, we'll do this to save money, and we'll do that to save money, and it was very exciting, and it's just fun to learn something new, and I realized there's not a big difference between the different trades, if you will, whether it's electrical or plumbing or static web apps or Python. And it's just skills, and it's fun to learn something new, especially something physical. So yeah.
Well, I fully expect that your any StackBit website, when you're working on it, has an under construction sign on it. Like our old days of technology we're chatting about with John Papa earlier. Well, I will let you take it away, and we make sure you put your questions in the chat. We'll be answering them afterwards.
Fantastic. So thanks for having me. And I have a slide deck to show and to kind of go along with the story that I want to share. And it's the story of fantastic websites and how to deploy them, and how how the internet is basically slowly shifting and really undergoing a super interesting trend change in terms of how we build websites, how do we deploy websites, how do we manage websites. And the shift is mainly from kind of old school monolithic systems that were both a site builder, a plugin ecosystem, a theme ecosystem, an admin panel, and a web server kind of all together. And the two biggest examples are WordPress and maybe Drupal. And we're slowly shifting into this new and exciting way of building websites that has come out of the needs that developers have had and DevOps people have had over the years. The need for better security, better performance, the ability to work with data separately from the site itself, and so forth and so forth. So why don't I delve in here, and please throw questions into the comments. I'm super ecstatic about static websites and the Jamstack, and I'm going to talk to you about that. So as mentioned, I'm a co-founder of StackBit, and StackBit is the Jamstack site builder for developers. What's a site builder? What's a Jamstack? I'll unpack that a little bit in a moment, but the crux of it is that we've built a site builder that puts developers first and focuses on developers. And empowers the people that they work with, whether those are marketers or clients or stakeholders within a company, to work in concert with them using modern technologies and static websites. So we're familiar with site builders, right? Like there's Wix and Squarespace that are built for consumers, right? And developers will typically not get too excited about them because they don't really control the technology. They don't control the stack. They can't fix the speed if it doesn't load fast enough. They can't manage the deployment. They can't really do a lot of things. It's a very consumer-oriented product. We have Webflow, which is a very exciting product, but is also sort of a walled garden and is focused very much on designers, right? So it empowers designers to build websites without developers, which for developers is not the most exciting thing, but at the same time, it's a great tool and it's very empowering for a lot of different marketing departments and people who want to do self-serve with an eye towards customization and so forth. We have site builders. I don't know if site builder is the right term, but like we have things like Adobe Experience Manager, which enterprises use to manage large scale, constantly going through A/B testing, massive e-commerce deployments, and so forth and so forth. And of course, we have like the monoliths like WordPress. The challenge is that, nowadays, 2021, a lot of people are, either graduating from college or from a code camp, or self-educating themselves about programming. PHP isn't really the most popular language out there. And developers, more often than not, are really excited about modern technologies, whether those are JavaScript or TypeScript, static web apps, or the Jamstack, Gatsby, Contentful, Sanity, and a variety of different tools that offer a modernized developer experience. And so what we try to do, and what I'll show you in a moment, is basically build a site builder that is focused on developers, and caters to the things that are important to them, but also empowers the people that they work with to actually work on websites. So let's unpack a little bit more about Jamstack and site builders. So Jamstack architecture, which is very often synonymous with static websites. Jamstack site is basically a static website, and it's a very loosely defined concept. But the idea of Jamstack, or modern static websites, is that we have an opportunity to separate how a website is represented, where its content is stored and managed. It typically introduces the idea of actually building these sites from a source code and deploying them to a CDN, typically through a CI/CD service and a cloud, hosting provider, such as Azure Static Web Apps. And the reason that developers have kind of pushed forward this paradigm is that it's very, very convenient for them, and it solves a lot of problems for them. The first problem is that websites that are hosted from a CDN are ridiculously fast. They're kind of like as fast as can be, disregarding any kind of like JavaScript loading shenanigans. But your content or your website makes its way to the viewer as fast as could be. It's kind of infinitely scalable. The performance is really great. It's very secure because it's really hard to hack into a CDN. And so for those of us who are, who have scars from the days of having a WordPress website and finding it defaced or suddenly containing random links and footer to drive traffic to somebody else's website, so that doesn't really exist much more. And lastly is just portability and control. It's kind of a microservice driven architecture. And the result of these separations is all of these great benefits. So what does it mean to build a Jamstack site builder and focus on developers? What it means is basically that we took something like Create React App or Next.js or Gatsby, and we put a Webflow like user interface on top of it. Basically means that with StackBit, you can come in, create a website from a variety of themes, own that website, own that content, right? So it spins up in your GitHub repository, you own the code, you have full control over the code. Because what we hear from developers quite often when they speak about, say Webflow, for example, is, well, Webflow gives me this little box and it says this box is for developers, and developers can express themselves and do anything they need for that box. But that basically limits the effect that developers have on a website to scripts that get loaded after the DOM loads. That's a very, very, very limited amount of control. If you look at the Jamstack architecture and kind of fully owning the code for your website, we create a repo for you. You have the code. It does not have any kind of unique dependencies or any special packages. It's a website that you can take, you can build, you can work on it locally, you can work on it with a hybrid cloud environment, you can have it integrated into a CI/CD service, you can have it deployed. And so that's kind of how we think about what it means to put developers first. Additionally, the site builder itself has an integrated code editor. It has a schema editor, and it kind of talks about the idea of structured content, which typically drives static websites and Jamstack websites. And the cool thing is, as I mentioned, it also has like this Webflow interface, which is where you kind of invite your marketing folks and your customers and your stakeholders to, where they can do WYSIWYG editing, where they can add a component or add a CTA and work just like they're kind of in Webflow or Elementor or or any Gutenberg on WordPress or whatnot, because people are like the less technical people have become accustomed to a site editing experience, which is very, very much high fidelity. And so if you take a marketing department that is used to working with Webflow, or people who in their free time are building sites with Wix, it's really hard to explain to them why for the company website, they're going to have to learn Markdown and learn how to commit to GitHub. And so bringing static websites and Jamstack websites to the enterprise, to SMBs, has been a little bit challenging because some of the kind of a lack of tooling and editability around it. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. And the exciting thing that we're going to talk about specifically today is that with our new Azure integration, any StackBit user can deploy a Jamstack website to Azure, and any Azure customer can now create a Jamstack site in just a couple of minutes. So I'll have a demo up for you in just a moment. I spoke a little bit about structured content. And so for our, for the typical StackBit website, we'll store your content for the website. So it's basically all of the strings, all of the parameters that affect the display of your website, all of your images, kind of everything in Markdown files and config files that are part of your GitHub repo. So as a developer, you have full control, full visibility, but then your marketers can use the visual WYSIWYG tool to make changes, and those basically trigger commits to your Git repo. So the visual editing is very, very much high fidelity, and it's what people expect when they think about a modern site builder. But as a developer, it all ends up translating into commits, whether it's your code changes that you make either locally or in the integrated code editor, or whether it's content changes that a fellow marketer is doing. It all comes in as commits on the repo. The Azure integration is something we're pretty much very excited about because we're all about empowering developers to deploy anywhere that they want. And we know that especially for SMBs and enterprises, deploying to Azure, it can be a very, very valuable thing. So I want to do a quick walkthrough mainly of what it looks like to set up a StackBit website from the Azure side, right? Because there's a little bit of configuration. You got to copy this, you got to move it here. So I kind of want to take you through that pretty quickly, and would love to answer any questions that folks may have after that. So let's run through this. This is pre-recorded, thankfully enough. Hopefully I can't make a mistake. But we visit the marketplace and find the StackBit app. That's kind of the first step. And there's going to be a couple of delays here, so I'm going to be saying a lot. So I apologize for that ahead of time. I'll try to smile. We create an instance of the app on the Azure side, and we'll typically create our own resource group or use an existing one. We then enter an application name, which is basically what's going to be created, and most of the other fields are automatically pre-filled. Once we get to actually deploying this resource within Azure, it takes a little bit. It can take a little bit of time, as in a couple of seconds or a minute or two. So just imagine a nice music flowing in the background, and how exciting life is going to be once this is set up, because you're going to be able to deploy modern static sites to Azure effortlessly as a developer, and offer that to your marketers and various stakeholders in the company. Once the deployment within Azure is ready, we'll have an opportunity to launch the StackBit Site Builder. So StackBit is kind of split into two pieces, which you don't necessarily need to think about it that way, but technically there's the, hey, we're going to create a website step, which spins up a new repo, lets you pick a theme and so forth. And then the next thing that you do is you find yourself in this visual editor. So from Azure, we're going to click StackBit. It's going to take us to, basically gives the opportunity to create a new website. This particular website is going to use Next.js and one of the themes that we saw there. After we pick the theme, we connect our Azure account by grabbing the tenant ID and then the managed resource group ID and put those in. It literally takes a minute for StackBit to spin up the site. And we now have a repo that you can clone locally and work on locally as a developer, create new components, modify behavior, do basically anything you want. And at the same time, your marketer, stakeholder, client, if you're an agency or a freelancer, can use something like this to actually edit strings, images, add new pages, tweak components, and so forth and so forth. So if I recap what we just saw, you can visit the Azure Marketplace. We have a nice short link to take you straight to the StackBit app, and that's stackbit.link/Azure-app. You go through the setup, you create a new website with StackBit. You make all of the choices with regards to the theme, the static site generator that you want to use, and you enter your tenant ID and the managed resource group ID, which is very important to tie this to your actual Azure deployment. And that is basically it. Present your fellow folks with a great editing experience, and off to the races. So that's basically the pre-recorded demo, and would love to answer any questions folks have about static websites on Azure and how to create them with StackBit.
Okay, first of all, have to compliment the amazing skeleton and very cool dog GIF in this presentation. Thank you so much, Ohad. This was great. I do have some questions here. My first question though is, was the title of your talk a reference to Harry Potter?
Well, there's a very good chance that it was.
Good. I
For those of you, yeah.
Love the reference. We have a lot of fun Disney and mystical references throughout this event today.
Right. Yeah. For those who aren't familiar, Fantastic Beasts and where to find them is a Harry Potter reference.
So I have a question for you. What did you set out to achieve originally with StackBit?
I decided together with two good friends to start StackBit when we saw static websites becoming popular and mainstream to an extent that we felt it was unstoppable, that this shift from let's serve our website from a server with all of the pros and cons that emanate from that to like, hey, we can actually build our website and host it from a CDN. When we saw that shift happening, we thought it was a once in a kind of generation opportunity in terms of technology to recreate the tools that people use, because most of the tools that we're familiar with don't really support this paradigm because it is so different. It is so different. And we basically felt that there was an opportunity to build the next WordPress, if you will.
Yeah. So what kind of companies are using it then? Are we talking like kind of smaller companies or large scale companies? Who gets the best use out of this product?
Thankfully enough, StackBit usage is very varied. In terms of company building, when we think about ourselves, we're very bottoms up driven. And so what it means is that a lot of developers use StackBit to build their personal websites, to build their grandma's website for the crochet collection, because we all manage websites for family and friends, and we're constantly looking for better ways to do that. So we have a lot of that. And then that basically translates into people who get more excited about static websites and Jamstack sites and the ability to create and work on them with StackBit. And so they start using StackBit within startups, within SMBs, and more recently also within enterprises. We have a lot of features that are very, very focused on enterprises, whether it's A/B testing or collaboration or scheduled releases or whatnot. So we kind of cover the gamut, but most of the usage and excitement right now is with independent developers, either for themselves, for their company, for their agency, for their clients.
Yeah, making things easier to get online. It feels like we have so many tools and ways to make the web and websites and static pages more accessible to more people. And thank you so much for helping doing that, bringing people onto the internet. All right, y'all. I have one more question here, and we are going to move on to our next section. But Ohad, what do you think about static websites in the Jamstack? Is this a match made in heaven? Are you a huge fan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the trends I feel this trend is unstoppable. I'm super excited about static. We're constantly dealing with like, how do I do that with a static website? And the ecosystem is producing more and more strategies and services to kind of address that. And so I feel like it's a winning strategy, and I'm super happy to have kind of like gone all in on it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.